for me, the spiritual journey that I've been on and the learning that I've done in working with my clients is that we're here to sort of relearn the idea of figuring out our own freedom from that, from the idea that someone else's set of rules or a structure that was set up for us is the key to a certain happiness or well-being, just because we've been told.
Learning to swim is about learning from others. Be the author of your own story, not a character in somebody else's story. Get inspired by others to take action. Learn how to set goals to exceed your own expectations. So often the answer that you are looking for is right in front of you. On Learning to Swim, we highlight those answers through storytelling. Hello, Amanda. Welcome to Learning to Swim.
Hi there. How are you?
I am doing great. So excited to have you as a guest today. Let's jump right in. Amanda Edwards. And Amanda Edwards, I'm going to just read a few bits of her bio, is a naturally gifted spirit communicator, certified spiritual coach, and attuned Reiki healer, whose prior 20-year career in nonprofit management and education undergirds her advocacy of holistic wellness for adults and youth. In addition to her private practice offering individual and group guidance in readings and workshops, Amanda leads a team committed to providing spiritual tools to the most at-risk populations. And that mission grew out of Amanda's work with youth in juvenile detention, group homes, and foster placement, as the vivid call for more collaborative and multi-layered services for young people intertwined with her spiritual work. A cohesive vision for a simple, replicable model was born, grounded in her education in politics and public policy at Pomona College. So you, as I mentioned, Learning to Swim is all about talking to folks who have had a, perhaps a less conventional or less linear professional path, and yet also to highlight kind of how much all of the different pieces of ourselves really come together at certain moments. So,
I think I could be the poster child for that, probably.
Yes, I definitely do. So you have not heard, you don't know the questions, as is the format with Learning to Swim, but let's start with a few of my favorites, which is, we'll just jump right in the pool, so to speak. What does resilience mean to you?
Oh gosh, I think that's so rooted in the experience of trial and error, the sense of failure or challenge that comes along so naturally. It's sort of part of the human experience. We need to expect that a lot of what we encounter will feel challenging or rough on our courage and our sense of self. And I think resilience means fine-tuning that sense of self through all of those experiences. So it's not necessarily that we stay one thing along our path, but that we learn which parts of new things are truly us and which parts we need to let go of. So it's a flexibility, I think, with learning new things and being willing to change at the same time as standing up on our feet when things get really tough.
Absolutely. And you mentioned failure. So what does failure look like to you?
This is going to sound like sort of a trite answer, but I actually don't feel that I have experienced failure in that I've learned to roll with things that haven't gone the way I envisioned. I think it's a construct that we can choose to put on an experience or not. And certainly that doesn't mean everything, is rosy always, but as much as I can look back and see endings in my life, a relationship ending, a particular job ending, a project not turning out that I had, gotten so excited to do this one project, and then it turned out that wasn't going to fit right. I truly, and I mean this, needed all of those things to do that fine tuning that I was talking about with the resilience. So I believe that's a word that we can choose to look at differently if we want to.
Yes, I was just reading a book yesterday, and part of the conversation was around not necessarily life or even moments in life being about perfection, and that really perhaps maybe more of the goal or the lens through which to experience these things is with a sense of wholeness, and kind of recognizing the pieces that go well for us and the pieces that don't go well, but as being part of that whole piece. And that's kind of, it was this particular author was suggesting that therein lies contentment. I think you and I have talked a bit about kind of happiness versus, if you want to use the word, contentment, and would you just talk a little bit about what the difference those things mean to you?
Sure. Yes. I think something that has framed my path. So it's funny, I even use the word frame. I'm about to get into the idea of letting go of structures that have defined us for us from a young age. We learn from childhood to go fit into a certain family pattern that is already in place before we've arrived. We go and fit into a school structure that is already formed before we got there. So much of our lives, at least in our Western capitalist culture, is defined by these frames. And for me, the spiritual journey that I've been on and the learning that I've done in working with my clients is that we're here to sort of relearn the idea of figuring out our own freedom from that, from the idea that someone else's set of rules or a structure that was set up for us is the key to a certain happiness or well-being, just because we've been told. I think finding for ourselves who we are and how we relate to this beautiful, diverse planet that we're on is contentment. That journey, that discovery, it can be difficult, and so that's why I think it doesn't always feel happy necessarily. Sometimes
Right.
it feels ecstatically joyful and just wondrous, and other times it's challenging. But that full spectrum of emotion and embracing what each kind of emotion tells us about who we really are, that's, I think, where the contentment comes in, is that kind of no matter what we're experiencing, we recognize it for what it is, that it's stretching us or helping us learn, I don't need this framework, I have my own way of doing things, or this is where this structure is valuable to me. I learn from the history and heritage that's been handed to me too. So there's a lot of nuance in that. And I think I really benefited actually from the structured education that I got. It did also teach me to be a very critical thinker. So that critical thinking, whether you're reading a text or doing a chemistry experiment, if you can translate that into your own life and look at your own life as a learning experience, then to me, that's what I drew from that really great education. It kind of doesn't matter the topic. You use the skills wherever you are.
Well, and I would agree with you 100%. That was, you and I have talked about discernment and establishing a practice of discernment. And so one of the things for myself that I feel like is a key ingredient to that is, because essentially a practice of discernment, meaning kind of a habit of looking at your life and looking at and taking a little bit of a observer's view towards different events and things like that. And one of those key elements is to approach it with some curiosity. And I do feel like curiosity is such a life-giving attribute. So how, and I see you as being a very curious individual, especially as you have, you've gone along this path, both personally and professionally. So how do you remain curious?
Oh, that's such an important quality. I feel that's a big compliment. So thank you for calling me that. It's something I always look for in the kinds of people that I spend time with. And sometimes I think that it's just a quality that I was born with in a certain way, or that I learned from watching people around me who just liked to dissect and talk about, the whys in what was going on around me. I think too, I so have relied on that sense of curiosity to understand the things that were going on with me. My spiritual nature didn't match really anything that was taught to me by my family traditions, the pretty traditional but progressive, open-minded religious environment that I was in. I didn't have anyone around me as a child who was talking about the things that I was experiencing spiritually. I have a really keen sense of what is going on a level that's not visible, apparently, to the people around me. So it was so compelling to learn what that was all about. And it entirely required that I be willing to follow a path that hadn't been laid out before me. So I think the curiosity probably was the most driving force of that, to understand, why do I see the world this way? Why do I understand people this way, or hear the things I hear and see the things I see? And therein the resilience had to come in, the determination had to come in too. But I think curiosity is the thing that sort of keeps it light and exciting, and is really probably at the root of the drive to keep going.
Well, and I think too, when I consider my own definition of curiosity, and also how it comes into play in my life, is it's important for there to be somewhat of an absence of judgment, because by its nature, being curious or being open to what is, really means that, to put down those pieces of ourselves where judgment or criticism or whatnot might come in play.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at sort of how the scientific method works, they say the majority of results end up being what we think we're looking for. I think it's just how we create the end with our way of thinking. And so we do the best we can to let go of preconceived notions and all those structures and the things that have been handed to us. And I'll say that's still a remaining mystery to me in life, how some people are more able to shed those preconceived notions and judgments. I consider myself a constant student of people, because the way I work with people, and then also beyond that, who we are as souls in a spirit sense is part of my everyday work. And there's such a huge range of openness and curiosity and willingness to go down a path. So I'm still learning where that comes from, and where that willingness starts. But we all come with a different capacity for that, I think.
And so I want to come back to that, but I want to, there's a couple of questions I like to ask about kind of your formative years. And one of them being is, did you have a favorite story growing up? Whether it be something that was read to you or that you read to yourself?
Gosh, well, that's such a hard question. I was just telling a student of mine recently, reading out loud was such a enormous part of my childhood. It was, we were talking about the concept of love languages, this client of mine. And I said, my parents read out loud to each other on long car trips. They read to us, we read to them. It's something that I wish people did more often now, since we're so into kind of soundbite little electronic pieces of information. But so to me, picking out one story from childhood is kind of hard, but there's a book, in fact, actually, what I go to right now in my brain is more the stories I read to my kids when they were very little. And so many. I mean, sense of humor is really important in a story to me, but there's one really wonderful book that I think comes from a writer from New Zealand, if I'm remembering right. And it's called, oh gosh, I just remember the name of the main character is Biddy Malone. And it has to do with this young girl who is just absolutely fascinated with dance and singing, and she's not very good. The family around her kind of plugs their ears. She's kind of klutzy, but she just wants to sing and dance all the time. And it's actually a very spiritual story to me. I remembered. It's called The Wishing of Biddy Malone.
Okay.
So it's about this inner drive that she has to just be herself, do her song and dance. It's very figurative when you read it as an adult. But that was one of the early favorites that I read to my daughter when she was really little. And it stuck with me as I then expanded on this spiritual path that I've been on, that it required a lot of stumbling and using my voice and having people plug their ears and, sometimes almost literally. But it's such a beautiful, it comes around to her really connecting with her own soul and spirit, and then being able to shine and becoming part of this beautiful fairy world. It's just, the pictures in the storybook are so gorgeous. So that world of imagination and the spirit beings that sort of surround her when she finally just commits to her path and gets better and better at it, I connect with so personally. But I love it for kids to be able to hope that, well, it's in the title, it has wish in the title. And I think for us to let kids keep wishing and keep dreaming and imagining is something that really needs to extend beyond young childhood. We don't do that as a culture enough as we get older. And to me, it's such an important creative force in the world that it's just a beautiful way to encapsulate that, I think.
I love that. Well, I know a lot of times it is that it does it does feel like we get kind of squashed, whether it's our dreams or those bits of us that are a little outlandish or are not understood by our families or where we live. And it I was going through some old photos recently, and I was so struck by looking at photos from of my dad and his brother from infancy up to being kind of probably early teenagers, and of course my grandparents in the mix of the photos, and just looking at these very, and it's not that they're grumpy or super jaded individuals, but just such the innocence and kind of purity of the joy that at least I perceive from the photo from these kind of younger years. So absolutely, I love the sound of that book. That sounds fantastic.
I'm
Is
glad you reminded me to think about it, because I haven't had it out for a while.
Oh, I love, yes, children's literature is amazing. I love it. Um, so is there a book that you would recommend right now that you're reading to,
Oh,
to our
people around me
audience?
are so tired of my bringing this book up, but I am passionately advocating for everybody in the country to read it. It's
Okay.
it's really simple, lovely collection of essays by Ross Gay, and it's called The Book of Delights.
Oh,
Probably a year or so old. He's a poet and a professor of writing at Indiana University. Um, he is a Black man in America and chose to write a book about things that delight him every day. And to
mm,
me, it's one of my favorite words. I think I overuse it even more now that I've read his essays, but to me, it's one of the most spiritual, non-spiritual books I can
mm,
recommend. It's just everyday life stuff, but he gets quite deep and then frivolous and then, silly, and it brings up that childlike quality that we all need to tune into more regularly.
mhm.
Um, it contains so much. I couldn't really describe why I love it, but I think it also lets all of us access something in ourselves. His writing is so pure and direct. And one of the comments I saw on the jacket of the book said something about it allows us to feel his memories are ours. When
Mm,
writing does that, and we can really join in with the writer, that gives us a glimpse of how we're all connected. And then the places where he veers off, it reminds us how diverse and different we all are. So I highly recommend it.
well, it sounds great. I'm going to definitely look it up. You have not recommended it to me. So,
Oh, good. Okay. I
so
haven't annoyed you with it yet.
I'm glad that you brought it
Yeah.
up. Um, so as we have been in the midst of living or learning to live with COVID, and also while we have, there have been conversations and protests around the country around racism and questions about race and equality and inclusion. Um, have you developed a simple or not simple, but is there a daily habit that you have incorporated in your life that could be new to you during this time, or maybe it's something that you find yourself relying on more heavily just to kind of stay focused and stay
Mhm.
continuing on your path and developing your work that you've got? Because I guess I experience it's very easy to have anxiety with COVID. Just kind of a low, consistent grade of anxiety, and then also, to be, um, feeling so much at this moment?
Yes. Oh gosh. Really this year, and a lot of people around me who do work like I do, very connected with their soul level being in the world. A lot of us have said to each other and to people close to us that this has been one of the best years we've ever had. And in a way, for me, because I have been used to having sort of one foot in the traditional world of 8 to 6 work life and all those structures that I referred to, it's not that long ago that I really decided to commit to my spiritual practice and full time devote myself to my readings and workshops and starting this new effort. Um, the way that the shutdown of our society as we know it gave me a gift. It's like it rolled out the carpet to exactly what that spiritual work requires, which is more stillness, more choice in how we fill our hours. I think being able to decide, this morning I really need to start the day with some yoga or a meditative run or things that I didn't have time for so much before that. So those are just very personal kind of luxuries that now have actually become part of daily life. And I think a lot of the world has started to realize what they thought of as luxuries are pretty necessary to get through a time like this. So certainly the time and space in the day, I think, has been a really good thing. And thank goodness, because we have had such an onslaught of big, global, weighty topics, signals to us that we have been complacent about things that we've known were problems, and we were able to ignore them. Things about our natural environment on the planet, things about how we treat each other based on skin color. None of it is, at least to me, I don't think we can claim that any of this is a surprise. It's sort of come all in one big swell, and so I think that's overwhelming to a lot of people. But from the standpoint of universal perspective and what our souls want for each other and for our planet, we've been asking for this on a sort of subconscious and sometimes conscious level. Things have to look bad before they get better. When you're redoing your house, or you're taking apart an old career in favor of a new one, when you're in a relationship that doesn't fit you and you're ready to move to a new one, it has to look disastrous for a little while. That's the way life cycles work. And so for me, a constant observation of nature is really valuable, because it reminds us of what I just said.
Right.
The cycles of nature, that's what we're seeing going on. Really close restorative time with people that you love, or activities that you love. Maybe you're really in a solitary environment right now, and that is a great way to learn to love your own self and your own company. There's so many ways that this time is challenging us and really propelling us forward to be better than we've ever been before. So I personally see it as an extremely positive, while ugly shift across the planet. There's a lot of ugliness that we can't deny is happening. But to dwell on it and circle the drain and talk about that part rather than where we can go from here would just be such a waste of this opportunity. So, it's something I get to devote really most of my day to: the writing, the reading, the talking with groups and workshops. And I'm relishing this time because it's really beautiful to see the way people's inner guidance is coming up when structures are kind of falling apart and looking so messy. So to me, it's been really good. Well, I don't want to sound like I'm dismissing the things that are really hard about it. Certainly on a personal level, in many concentric circles of my life, I can see that suffering and have felt it myself in some ways, but I just try to not land there for too long.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So again, kind of going back to your childhood or early adulthood, what was your very first job? What was that first task or job that you got paid for specifically?
That I got paid for. I was first thinking about all the chores my sister and I used to have to do on Saturdays.
Right, yeah.
Not really sure that we got paid for it. I don't know if you could count an occasional allowance. It was just expected. That was how we earned our roof over our heads.
That's right.
Honestly, my first job that I got paid for, I was probably about 11 years old when I started babysitting. I was one of these kids who, it's like my maternal nature came out when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I was always the very nurturing, caretaking, motherly, adored babies. I would sort of fight my friends for the chance to play with whatever baby was around. So I thought of that as such a treat that I got asked to babysit when I was that young, but I was also very responsible. And I think people probably weren't as careful about who they asked to babysit as they are now, as far as how young I was. And the reason I tell that part is that my awareness of the role of that feminine maternal nature as a really crucial part of what's going on the earth right now has become more and more clear as the years have gone on. So that's one of the ways that when you talk at the beginning about the learning to swim concept and the nonlinear path, my work has come to incorporate all of those parts of me. So it's no longer a separate topic to say, I was this kid who so wanted to mother, to nurture, to love. That's directly connected to what I do in being an intuitive healer, empath, spiritual coach. Ultimately, I also had this very activist drive to me. I was fascinated with politics and social justice issues at a really young age. And I think that kind of comes with that maternal nature too. It's this need to take care of those that I could see were being left on the fringes for various reasons because of poverty, race, all kinds of issues that I started to learn about, again, I had a really good education that made me aware of a lot of what was going on in the world beyond. And growing up in Southern California, you're very connected to such a diverse array of life circumstances in and around Los Angeles. So that compelled me to follow the path that I did in college and after, really being driven towards social justice issues, working with at-risk kids. And I also happen to be a really effective communicator, writer, editor type person. So I sort of combined those. And my first real grown-up job combined the two in a public policy consulting firm where I was a writer, reporter kind of a person. So I really learned the journalism field quickly, and that led to a lot of my other roles later on. But then too, I was extremely driven to have kids myself at a younger age than most of my peers were doing, back to that, maternal instinct that I had. So was sort of something that started to shape my career life in a big way, because I didn't want to have my kids and then hand them to someone else. It was important to me that I was the one with them most of the time. So I ended up doing a lot of work that could be done while mothering, which to me, you know, the freelance writing, the consulting, there were a lot of years where my main focus really was them, these three little kids that I had. And it also gave me a little bit of a sense of the entrepreneurial work that I would have to do to be ready now for myself to leave the institutional structure that I've been working in and work for myself. So it all does sort of mesh together ultimately, but it takes some time. We have to have patience with ourselves and that path to make sense, because there were a lot of times when I thought my own path did not make any sense at all.
Oh, yes, I can certainly relate to that for myself.
Yeah.
So if the other thing that we talk about on learning to swim is our blind spots and our bright spots, and not so much in terms of if they're, you know, I think that they're all kind of the different sides of the same coin, so to speak. But so along those lines, what would be an attribute or a talent that if I were to, I call them your in plain sight talents. So if I were to kind of survey your friends and family and colleagues, they would say, Amanda excels at this, or she's so great at this.
Oh boy. You know, I think it combines what I was just talking about, probably my capacity to communicate emotional topics. I think it comes across in writing and speaking, I think, with people that I think I've gotten better at it the more I've learned to let spirit speak, as I like to say to my clients, just to stay out of my own way and let ideas flow. I think my communication is a reason that my readings can be effective for people, that I'm translating sort of nebulous concepts into something more concrete that people really can grab onto. And that has served me well in a variety of roles as a writer too. So I think that's something that I hear other people really appreciate. And then the caretaking, nurturing thing, it's just so automatic for me that sometimes that can be what was it? It was bright spots, and what was the other
And
one? Oh,
blind spots. Yes.
Yes. So kind of, you know, throwing myself on the tracks instead of
yes.
not necessarily thinking of my own well-being in some situations. That has been an issue at times. And also, you know, what's important to learn if you are naturally that kind of a caretaking person is that you're not supposed to take care of other people. Everyone wants their own wants their own autonomy and to discover their own capacity. So that's something I've had to learn to mold into a new gift that is more hands off, I guess I should say. And we learn that as parents too, as our kids get older. You really need to be able to just watch what others want to do in their own way.
Absolutely. I think you and I share that tendency. And so I think it was yesterday, a thought crossed my mind that I very respectfully asked one of my children first before sharing the thought if they were open to some suggestions perhaps, or some other
very diplomatic
just other thoughts that I had, rather than, you know, my old self just being like, you know, let me tell you this. Yes. So, and then what would be more of what would be more of a hidden talent, or something that maybe is less obvious to folks who spend time with you, or to who,
Ah.
that you kind of reserve?
Well, yeah, I don't know how hidden, I don't know. I'm pretty out there with everybody, with most people with the people I'm really close to. So I don't think
Right.
that I hide a lot. But I think one of the things that would surprise people who know me in the spiritual coach capacity, they might not be aware of sort of the way I academically excelled in my past, that I actually do know how to fit into a pretty traditional, um, societally approved version of success. And I sort of tried that out for myself. And then it just didn't call me the way a more spiritual, feeling based line of work does. So, I'm kind of a trivia nerd, and I was just on a car trip and was sort of forcing my companion to quiz me on geography and just to show how much I know, how smart I am. Um, but
Oh my gosh.
the family that I grew up in, I was referring earlier to love languages. I think proving how smart you are is a big part of sort of expressing yourself in the family that I come from. And it can be in sort of random things like facts about choral music, or, it doesn't have to be really anything in particular, but just that you know the right answer. So that I think probably some people would be surprised that I am competitive in that way. I
Yeah.
feel like it's something that I've had to learn to shed my sense of proving myself, and competing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't, I don't know how to
Um,
describe that any
no,
other
no,
way.
it makes sense to me. I get it. Well, I do want to, uh, prior to when we were talking offline prior to today, uh, I want to get into, because I think it's so fascinating that the work that you are undertaking, in addition to your one-on-one
Mm.
support and coaching and readings and workshops, but particularly the program that you're developing for at-risk youth.
Thank you. Yes, I am so excited about that. It's one of the things that's been a really delightful surprise about this year, is that it has helped me have colleagues again. Working independently for yourself every day can be sort of a solitary pursuit. And putting this program together has been kind of a long, very quietly held dream of mine, to offer some of the tools that I've learned from a spiritual perspective to kids I just absolutely loved working with before, in writing workshops and kind of more traditional type of outreach. Um, I've always learned as much from my time with kids locked up behind bars as they probably a lot more learned from them than they've learned from me. And I always talk with my team about that. Work that we are doing is not about going in and saving anyone, but rather to go in and offer a hand out and a recognition of how much they have to give the world. That their experiences, many traumatic, painful, unjust, challenging experiences have created in them this capacity to do so much of value. And I'm very excited to discover how many other adults are out there like me who really want to be helping with that message. So yeah, I've been working on creating a curriculum, like you said, and describing my in my bio that it's a pretty simple set of spiritual tools. Not, that word isn't always comfortable for everyone. It's not religion based in any way. It's just a recognition of our being a mind, body, spirit, emotional being that is more than just this physical package that we're in. And teaching some practices that help me get through challenging experiences, help my partners get through challenging experiences. Our team is very diverse. We have men and women and different races and ages, and we all share a sense of this sort of holistic wellness being more than what any of us really learned in school. And so
Right.
how do we expect young people who've come through really challenging circumstances to be ready for those challenges without a little more of that foundation? So ideally, we're hoping that it will grow from there into serving other populations as well, but starting with that juvenile hall environment is just a place I really feel at home and excited to do some work. And right now, that's where we are, is in this sort of proposal stage of this. But it's really exciting and energizing to see the momentum that it's gaining with other people working on it.
Well, I'm so excited to see what comes forth. And I already, when we've talked about it, I think there is such a tremendous need, and it is, I guess one of the things that I particularly resonate with is that kind of combining of your experiences and those places that you feel really compelled and called to work in, and certainly a population that will benefit for, I think what I hear you saying, you were saying that the word spiritual can sometimes be a bit of a impediment for some folks, and not to confuse it with religion. And a lot of what you're really talking about is tools to to know ourselves better, and to be more whole. And I think that's such a more empowered place for most people, and really is, and also a place of wellness for most of us.
Absolutely, yeah. And what I love about this too is, truly, I won't be teaching anything different with a kid who happens to be wearing their prison uniform than I do with an adult in pretty comfortable, privileged, it's part of being a human, our capacity to use these things that are within us, wherever you are, whatever circumstances you're in. So there's something really beautiful about that too. There's sort of an equalizing, now not to take away from the diversity that we are, because that's such a beautiful, important part of the planet, but the equalizing of that experience of knowing ourselves, knowing how to tune into ourselves, into our inner wisdom or our higher knowledge, whichever way you like to look at it. It takes away any kind of borders based on age or socioeconomic background or life experience, and gives everyone the chance to see each other from a more true place. So that gets into some pretty lofty and grand hopes for this kind of program, but it's something I believe in strongly, and it's not that complex, really. It's a pretty simple set of things that just, we haven't been putting as much energy and attention toward them being valuable. but there's definitely a movement in that direction, I think, right now.
Well, and it occurs to me as you were mentioning, that it's in terms of a modality, so to speak, that it it works across the board. And really probably, and I don't know if you can speak to this, maybe the biggest challenge or where the differences lie are in the willingness of the participants to be curious, to to make themselves, it would seem to me, maybe somewhat vulnerable, and trying something new or unfamiliar can always be a little bit scary.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something that we have to really build into the order in which we do things and what the actual activities are that bring out some of this stuff. It might look like a really intense physical workout actually first, that brings us to our spiritual nature in a way that we're kind of tricking people into. And there's no secrets in this process, but that it actually includes some really outward material experiences that are easily accessible to anyone. So we start with that, just sort of the practice of engaging your body, especially in a population that has had really extreme experiences with trauma. It's a very trauma-informed healing process and then empowering process. So our work is very much based in research around how to best access someone's best nature when they have all kinds of walls and sort of reactive tendencies from negative experiences. And then the other thing about our program is that it really looks at the fact that we all learn very differently. So what might be the right doorway in for one person is going to not land at all on another person. So it's got a lot of variety built into it. But overall, we have in mind the end goal of the kinds of, empathy that we want to help generate in everyone, sense of their own capacity as a physical person, as a creative, expressive person. So there's sort of an artistic expression component to it that, might just look like something that's really fun, but we know what tools are coming out of that. So that's been the joy of creating this program, is that it's calling on our creativity to find, inroads to let some of that stuff out without kind of taking it straight on, like we're all going to sit around and right now. We're not expecting any of the kids that we work with to be really into that from the start. So it's really fun and kind of real people who are working on it. And I think that's one of the things that will surprise others, is what comes out of that work, and how, again, like I said, it's pretty simple if you just know what you're looking for as the end result. And I'll say too, a lot of this work is inspired by traditions of restorative justice and the experience of circle justice that we've learned from indigenous cultures around the planet, have learned that taking care of each other and healing together from an event that injured either property or someone else, or sort of went against the group acceptable behavior. We learn so much from cultures that live closer to the earth, that are more aware of natural environment and patterns. And our very punitive system of justice in this country is missing so much of that. So this program too aims to employ a more natural and communal version of justice that is shown over and over to work really well, and especially with the teenage population. They're very sort of ripe for that experience at the stage that they are. So it includes a lot of layers, but putting it all together has been a fun puzzle to figure out.
Oh my goodness. Well, we will definitely have to check back in with you as this journey goes forward. And thank you again for sharing all the bits, and really you make for a very easy interview, because you seamlessly weave your experiences together, which is so much of what this platform is about, is talking about all these different parts of our lives, different gifts and talents that we have, and how they come together. And so it's been such a pleasure. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you so much. I always enjoy talking with you.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Our goal is to inspire others and share stories to find meaning in your daily life. Let go of the traditional norms and be yourself at home, work, and beyond. The awareness of bright spots and blind spots is a performance-enhancing tool that you can apply to your life and to your organization today.